Greetings, as always, it's Gordon Causey on my YouTube station. Going to be talking about politics again tonight. This will probably be the last video I do, at least for a while, talking about the recently completed Canadian election from back on April 28th, when Canadians elected a super minority Liberal government led by Mark Carney. And in the wake of that defeat for the Conservatives, there's been a lot of hand wringing, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of second guessing about what went wrong. Why were the Conservatives unable to defeat the Liberals under Mark Carney after 10 years of what is widely regarded pretty much universally to be 10 disastrous years under Justin Trudeau? And they changed the leader of the party, and the Conservatives went from polling had them up 20-ish points. They were winning by-elections everywhere, and then everything completely flipped. Was it because Pierre Poilievre refused to go on to the Joe Rogan podcast? Would that have helped? Were there policies that should have been put forward? Was Poilievre ineffective in distancing himself from Donald Trump in the United States? The questions are endless, but most of it I find, especially coming from individuals and a lot of social, pardon me, a lot of social media influencers, seems to be pointing the finger at Pierre Poilievre and his advisors, and you lost it. uh, there are even some voices calling for Poilievre to step down, but I'm going to ask you to consider whether it was us, conservatives ourselves, individuals who perhaps lost it. And that will be tough for a lot of people to hear. It's always someone else's fault, never our fault, especially in the culture we live in today. I wrote out a post on my Facebook timeline. I'm going to include the text of it as the very first comment, which I will pin, and along with a link to my Facebook profile if you want to read. But I'm simply going to read what I wrote, and I just put this up again on my Facebook timeline. And I titled it, Maybe It Wasn't Poilievre or His Advisors, Maybe It Was Conservatives Themselves, or because I very much was hopeful of a Poilievre Conservative victory, myself. And here's what I wrote. People far smarter than myself have remarked about the tribal nature of humanity. Sometimes they call it our default position. And suffice to say that human beings, we seek out people that we share things with, and it can manifest itself in many different ways. It can be racial, linguistic, cultural, religious. It's probably an endless list. Sexual orientation, political and ideological worldviews, and on and on and on. Going back to the COVID era, that became something of a dividing line, and there were two broad based camps, or if you prefer, tribes. There were those who bought into the approved and heavily propagandized narrative, and then there were those who did not. Now, if you're not new to my station, everyone who's been on my station before should know what camp I fell into. But if you're new to me, my station, my Facebook profile, I was in the latter group, pushing back right from the very start. However, I have to admit to feeling somewhat out of place, even among my COVID tribe, a lot of the time. Why? Well, I wasn't big on attending rallies or protests. I preferred going to worship services at churches led by strong leaders who refused to acknowledge all the lies that were being foisted on the population. There was a church in my hometown that began meeting outdoors in May of 2020 after it suddenly became okay for large outdoor gatherings in the wake of the George Floyd protests. Then in March of 2021, They brought in what they called a circuit breaker lockdown, and that even made outdoor gathering illegal. And at that time, I found a church up in Peterborough, Ontario, that was meeting indoors without any stupidity, no masks or distancing or anything of that nature. I also traveled quite a distance. I sometimes drove 3+ hours to go to the Waterloo area, Aylmer, Napanee, where I found congregations ignoring what I viewed to be anti-science rules. I won't go into too much detail about that. It's in plenty of my other videos. Uh, I did go to some protests, but not many. The biggest one I went to was up in Peterborough. Maxime Bernier of the People's Party of Canada was speaking, along with Randy Hillier, who at that time was a member of provincial parliament and a former member of the Progressive Conservative Caucus led by Doug Ford. There was another one in a neighboring town called Coburg, I think it was in front of City Hall. I think that was the building we were gathered in front of. And the only other one I recall was in downtown Toronto. And it was a combination protest rally and worship service led by Aylmer's pastor Henry Hildebrand, who I consider a friend. Why didn't I go to more protests during that long period of what I consider to be mass formation psychosis? Well, honestly, a lot of it had to do with the loudest voices at those protests. And to be kind, let's just say they were not my kind of people. I've said many times on my station, I've never been a fan of the F Trudeau signs or the more recent iteration, the F Carney signs. And it's not that I disagree with the sentiment, but my sensibilities are different. Publicly displaying profanity on a flag, this is going to sound harsh, but honestly, it's just too trailer park for my taste. Now, does that mean that I was going to switch camps and that I was going to start staying 6 feet away from people, put a diaper on my face, and then line up to get injected with a pharmaceutical product that had not undergone proper testing? No, of course not. Uh, and I have to admit, this is difficult to express because I don't want to come across sounding like some kind of snob. I don't think anyone who knows me would describe me as a snob. I don't think anyone would use those terms or anything like them. But I have to acknowledge that what I'm saying here and what I'm going to keep saying is going to sound that way to some people, perhaps. And all I can say is, oh well. Uh, we all remember public and high school. You had cool kids, and then you had losers. And personally, if you know my personal history, I was never really part of any group, and I think that's because my family moved around so much when I was young. When I entered grade 7, so when I was 12 years of age, I was already attending my fourth school, and if you include kindergarten, 5 schools. And because our family was flipping back and forth between the United States and Canada and the US, the culture was very different at each school. But that's enough for now about how I came to have the perspective that I have. My point is that there were always cool groups in school and loser groups. There was a Hollywood version of this that was played out very effectively, I believe, in that 1980s classic movie, The Breakfast Club. Many will have seen it. And personally, because of my perspective, I couldn't really identify very well with any of the characters in that movie. All I could do was just appreciate the presentation of the social dynamics of teenage life at that time. And I imagine that it's much the same now in broad strokes. You've got your groups, your cliques, your clans. There are those who are the inside crowd, those who are on the outside, the cool kids and the losers. And now I want to branch into, the role that media played and the role that media continues to play politically in Canada. Our state-sponsored media, because they all receive money from the government. Our state-sponsored media mouthpieces do a very effective job of painting one group as cool and one group as being a bunch of losers. And they do it in a very clever and in a very condescending way, sadly. During COVID, we all know who the cool group was, and likewise, it's the same now with the prevailing political climate. The cool, smart people went along with COVID, and they likewise now shun those who embrace anything approaching a genuine conservative political ideology. That is how the media in this country frames the debate. And it can work in pushing a lot of people into the cool camp, the camp they want you to be in. So you watch a nightly newscast and they speak in disparaging but very well scripted tones about those who have traditional conservative beliefs. It's annoying, like I said, condescending, and it's perplexing as hell, but it is what it is. They have the money, a lot of it coming from the government. They hire university grads. They have professional wardrobes. They've got all the trappings, all the production value, and they put a really fancy cover on the book they're selling. Then you flip over and you watch something like Rebel News with its quote unquote citizen journalists. They lack the education and polish of their mainstream adversaries. And a lot of people gravitate to the mainstream because they want to be in with what they perceive to be the cool crowd. Oh, those rebel news types, they're a bunch of losers. I'm cool. Now you got YouTube personalities like the Pleb Reporter, very popular. That's another example. And I have nothing against the guy. I did not watch a lot of his stuff, but I would check him out here and there because I wanted to see the size. I wanted to get a feeling for some of Pierre Poilievre's rallies. How many people was he drawing in? Was he bringing in as many people as it seemed? And yes, he was. He was packing them in. Uh, However, I can see Pleb Reporter and other social media influencers, those with a big footprint, pushing people away from the conservatives. Um, and I probably haven't expressed this as well as I could, but it's a comparative. They watch the nightly news, then they watch Pleb Reporter, and one's cool and one's not. Um, And while I may not have expressed this as well as I could have, I don't know that there is a good way to put it without risking offending some, which again, that's not my intent. And for what it's worth, I'm a Christian. We talk about, look at the log in your own eye before you criticize the speck in another not other's eye. Well, for what it's worth, I'm probably guilty of pushing people away from the conservatives myself because I profess Jesus Christ as Lord. And I recognize that this turns a lot of people off because people will say, here we go again, another religious moron with the conservatives. What a shock. I'm not voting for the same party as that idiot. Anyway, that's enough. That's what I wrote. Appreciate you watching, and I invite your comments down below. If you like what I have to say, you are, of course, invited to, hit that like button, to subscribe. You can share this out if you wish, and I'll leave you there. God bless, and we'll see you again when I do my next video. Sometimes they're live, on occasion I do them like this. Take care now.